Hi, thank you everyone for being here. Devin, thank you so much for being here as well. It's such a pleasure to chat with you. So just a little bit about Devin, if you're not already aware, Devin is one of the founders of OpenSea, which is the largest NFT platform today. Previously, Devin started his career at Pinterest as an engineer, and then he built ClaimDog, which is a fintech company that was acquired by Credit Karma. And OpenSea was started in late 2017 with just CryptoKitties as a marketplace for CryptoKitties. And today, I just checked this, but in the last 30 days, OpenSea processed $4 billion worth of volume, which is incredible. And I think not many people remember this, but OpenSea was actually built through an entire bear market. I think we've all seen this rocket ship growth of NFTs lately, especially in 2021. But when OpenSea had just started, NFTs hadn't really taken off yet. People really weren't sure what NFTs were for, or what kind of use cases they were best suited for. So can you set the scene for what the NFT market even looked like at the end of 2017? So for example, why did you start with a CryptoKitties marketplace?
Sure, yeah. Well, at the end of 2017, CryptoKitties was really one of the only NFTs that was available. So it was an interesting starting place. There was CryptoPunks and a few of the kind of rare Pepe experiments on Bitcoin, but for the most part, it was really just getting started, and people were starting to think about this idea of different asset standard for a different type of item, right? That wasn't fungible. So yeah, for OpenSea, it was really the only thing we could do was just to build a marketplace for CryptoKitties, and CryptoKitties had its own marketplace, so kind of in the early days it wasn't very useful because they already kind of had a way to trade. But I think the really exciting moment for us was to see new projects launch, particularly in gaming back then, that needed a marketplace. So a new card game would launch, and they would have initial item sales, but you wouldn't be able to trade, or you wouldn't be able to buy and sell them outside of that. And so that was really, it was exciting to us that you could build a eBay for digital stuff. If you tried to go and build that for existing digital things like game items, et cetera, you'd have to go and integrate with each game. Yeah. But with this asset standard, you could build something that really scaled horizontally, which was just really cool and really exciting. And back then it was mostly just folks who were excited about the future of it, as opposed to people who were looking at the metrics or saying that there was actual traction there.
Yeah. Well, what was it about NFTs that drew you in, given that, as you mentioned, there really wasn't any or much traction in the beginning?
Yeah. I mean, I think, my advice to any entrepreneur in the space is just follow your curiosity. So for us, it was sort of, we were already interested in crypto. We knew we wanted to do something in the space. And NFTs were this really interesting intersection where it was like crypto and blockchain, but it was consumer, right? It was a little more mainstream accessible than some of the more deep DeFi or kind of layer one type things. So it really felt like there was a technology that could go very broad to billions of people that people could talk about and like engage with in a social way. So that was just really cool. And I think, at the time there wasn't a lot of traction around NFTs. There certainly were some people who really believed in it, but then generally, like, it took a while for it to evolve into something that more people cared about.
Yeah. Well, what was your early thesis on NFTs and what you felt like they would be used for, and how, were you right, or in what respects were you right, and what respects were you wrong? Like, what surprised you with the evolution of NFTs?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think the ways we were right were that we kind of had a thesis that it was impossible to completely predict what NFTs would be successful, right? Yeah. So that's why we built the marketplace so horizontal, right? So that we would have something that worked for every single use case. And that, I think that turned out to be right, is that a lot of the things that are happening today were near impossible to really predict. Yeah. Some of these crazy experiments, Loot, Bored Ape Yacht Club, really hard to say, like, when is that going to happen? I think where we were wrong was I don't think we really expected sort of collectibles and art to gain so much steam. We really thought it would be primarily from like legitimate games using NFTs. and I still believe, and we've definitely seen a lot of that. Axie Infinity is incredibly successful.
Yeah.
Gods Unchained. So it is happening, but I didn't expect art and collectibles to kind of have such value over time. But I do think gaming is coming.
Yeah.
And I still have high conviction that that's sort of the next frontier for NFTs.
Yeah, I think everyone was probably surprised by art and collectibles, because in the non-crypto world, I mean, the number of people who care about art is much smaller than the general population, or the number of people who are actively collectors. I think our mind kind of goes to baseball card collectors, or or Beanie Baby collectors. It's definitely a much smaller population than what we would have expected as a first use case. But I think the really interesting thing about collectibles, and I'm really curious to hear why you think art and collectibles took off, is that it actually turned out to be a proxy for finding your tribe, right, and finding your community, and actually being able to join this group of people that has a shared love for a certain asset or a certain identification with an asset, to the point where today a lot of people have their online personas defined by the NFTs that they own, whether that's a Bored Ape or a CryptoPunk or a Cool Cat, or it feels like actually people are really personally identifying with that. But yeah. I'm curious why you think that category really took off.
I mean, I think it's exactly what you described, right? It's basically this idea that you can sort of belong to a tribe, and the ownership of something is an indicator of how kind of devoted or how excited you are about that. And I think it really, it started with, just to kind of go over a little bit of the kind of history of it, it really did start with CryptoPunks, right? Which was this first, I really think CryptoPunks has now become a digital antique, right? The first digital antique, I would say. Maybe Rare Pepe's is one as well, but it started with that tribe, and those folks just being so devoted to the space and the fact that they were kind of one of the first pioneers, and then it was sort of a trickle down from there, because not everyone can own a CryptoPunk, but you can own something that's also rare, also unique, and identify with it. And of course, Bored Ape Yacht Club on the screen is sort of tailoring to a slightly lower price range than CryptoPunks. And so, I think it's really this really exciting cultural phenomenon where people want to own a piece of internet history.
Yeah.
And just super strange. Again, I had no idea that this sort of thing would happen, but it's really interesting to watch for sure.
Yeah. How do you think gaming might take off? Because that was your thesis from the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Is that NFTs would really be this great asset that you have in game.
Yeah.
When do you think we'll see that take off in a bigger way? I mean, I think the obvious example here is Axie Infinity has really taken off, and there's that run, and there's a lot of things there. But do you think is there something missing, or a missing tool in the space?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends like what you classify as a game or not, right? Like, I mean, loot is really interesting, and it sort of has game mechanics built into it. And I think loot's cool because it's sort of...
Maybe you can define loot for everyone.
Yeah, sure. I'm not an expert, so I'll just sort of tell it as best I know it. But basically, it's sort of a generic asset that can be used in all sorts of different applications. So it's just this basic primitive, and then you can build experiences around it, right? Mm-hmm. And so you can own some particular types of loot, and then you could go into a different application and use that in some game, right? And that's just a really cool idea. We'll see whether this iteration of it takes off. But I think the high level point is it's kind of like looking at the things that you couldn't do without blockchain, right? You can do a lot of things without blockchain. You can build a great game without blockchain, but what are the things that are just really unique and weird that you kind of need this new type of primitive for? So there's kind of two angles. One is you build a great game, and then you sort of build an ecosystem around it. The other, the loot approach, is like, you build this just very basic thing and then kind of build a really strong community around it. So I would kind of be on the lookout for like, what are in the same way that these sort of profile picture projects were super weird and creative, I would kind of look to like, what are the most creative games and how could they sort of surprise you and emerge from.
I do think the the kind of cohesive narrative for NFTs is everything that's taken off is not something that we've actually seen in the Web2 world, right?
Yeah.
It's always been a little bit surprising.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, to that effect, I'm really curious, you're building a platform, especially in the very beginning, there were no or very few use cases for NFTs, and you were effectively building a platform for an industry that barely existed. How do you make product decisions around that? Or like, you know, I feel like OpenSea has done such a great job growing with the industry itself. It effectively has a front row seat to the entire rise of NFTs. You know, what were some of the early product decisions or strategy decisions that you made that made OpenSea so well positioned to kind of be flexible and take advantage of that?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest one was just being very horizontal from day one. That was sort of the philosophical decision we made, which was not.
That's very that's the anti-startup.
Exactly. Yeah, it was like sort of the VC advice was like start with the vertical and then expand, right? But the thing is, I think the thing is every market's different, right? Like if you sort of take the playbook of whatever internet startup and you say like, oh, that worked there, and then you apply it to this, it often just doesn't map well. I think what people kind of overlook sometimes is every problem and every industry is actually has just like nuances to it, and so pattern matching is often not the right thing to do. So horizontal from day one was really like important to us because it was the new thing, right? You could build a generic marketplace that spanned every single NFT, and that was just really, really cool. And actually, I mean, we still have a lot of improvements to make it OpenSea around searching, sorting, filtering in different verticals, and we're investing in sort of building out like custom experiences or just richer experiences for specific projects. But I think it is true that the general idea of an NFT marketplace works really well across different projects, and we have these trait filtering systems that they're not perfect, but they really do get the project off the ground. So I'd say horizontal was probably like the biggest strategy.
Interesting. And having built a fintech company before OpenSea that was solidly in the Web2 space and now kind of building something that's solidly in the Web3 space, how do you think that was different in how you approached the business?
Very different. And the first company, we only sort of made it to some degree of scale before we were acquired, so it wasn't nearly kind of the exciting journey that OpenSea has been. But I would say, I think there's a couple of things. One is relying a lot more on kind of conviction, right? So you kind of do have to have a thesis and be willing to kind of work on that for a long period of time. Now it's a little different because everything is exploding, so you can kind of play into the explosive growth. But if you're doing anything like super new or super novel, I do think you have to be willing to work on it for a long period of time. And I guess this is true about Web2 as well, but I think it's even more true about sort of frontier technologies, just being willing to invest in it for 4 or 5 years. Honestly, if we, like, at OpenSea, if we hadn't seen traction this year or next year or the year after, we'd still be working on OpenSea if we were at the same levels of volume. And I think there's a limit to that at some point where you're like, okay, this isn't happening or whatever. But I think like we just loved it so much, and the community was just so passionate. And so I think that the important thing in a frontier technology like crypto is finding a problem that you just really, 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 really want to work on for like a long period of time.
Yeah, I was looking at some price charts yesterday, and when OpenSea started, ETH was hitting all-time highs. So this was December 2017. ETH was, hitting $1,000. Everyone was going wild. A year later, in December 2018, ETH hit $83. So you mentioned conviction. Where did the conviction come from? And were there small moments along the way where you were like, actually, this is worth working on because there is this one spark that a lot of people aren't noticing or a lot of people aren't seeing?
Yeah. Well, I think the conviction came from the developers and projects that were building in the space, right? There wasn't a lot of usage, right? If you look at like volume numbers today versus back then, or number of traders today versus back then. It's 100,000x growth, right?
January 2021, you had 7,000 traders, which was already a lot because that was through 2018 and 2019. I think you had fewer than 1,000. And then last month in August, there were 250,000 traders on OpenSea. Yeah.
And yeah, if you look at sort of active wallets, it's a similar like growth curve. And yeah, but I think what was cool was like you saw these projects launch, you saw developers really interested. And interestingly enough, a lot of the projects that launched are now being kind of tried again and are working because there's more people out there to engage with them. So I think it's just sort of like iteration cycles, passion from the community. That's all this really, that's the sort of sign you look for. And if you pay attention to those, it's really clear that it was going to go somewhere. It's just a matter of how long.
Yeah, you had this really interesting anecdote when you were talking, I think this was back in 2019, with Sasha from Near Protocol about crypto celebrities and how OpenSea kind of provided a platform that allowed this kind of new mechanism to form. But anyways, maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah. So there was a project called Crypto Celebrities, which had like a very specific pricing mechanic baked into it, which meant that you couldn't actually sell. They had their own sort of marketplace type thing, but you couldn't sell at a sort of decrement of the previous price. And so OpenSea kind of came along, was like, oh, here you can like sell your crypto celebrities for whatever price you want. And so we had these crazy large sales. And it was such a weird thing, and like such a funny phenomenon that we're like, I think that's the other kind of lesson is whenever you see something that is weird, it usually is a sign, like weird behavior, weird user behavior, it's usually a sign there's something there. And that was kind of, for us, that was definitely a moment where we're like, okay, this idea is interesting and fun.
Yeah. Well, we're almost at time. Maybe you can talk about how you see the vision for OpenSea, maybe some of the new developments that have happened.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious, 10 years from now, what does OpenSea look like, and how are you envisioning that? And I think maybe part of it is also, we don't know how the NFT marketplace will evolve, but curious how you think about it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in the near term, we're really just trying to invest in providing the best customer experience possible. We've gone through tremendous growth, so there are a lot of growing pains, and we totally acknowledge that. And we're just trying to fix a lot of those issues, right? A lot of the user frustrations around sort of buying and selling and like discovering. So a lot of it in the short term isn't really rocket science, but really making this thing a lot more accessible and a lot easier to use for both the people who are power users, but then also new users as well. One exciting development is, or actually two exciting developments. One is we just launched our mobile application, which is a sort of first start into a smoother native experience for OpenSea. It just has sort of basic exploration functionality now, but we'll be adding the ability to actually buy and sell on the mobile app. So that's really, really an exciting move. And then the other one is expanding across multiple blockchains. So we launched our support for the Polygon chain, which has been really successful. We have a large number of monthly purchases on that chain at a much lower transaction value because people are able to pay with lower gas costs. And we really re-architected a lot of how the marketplace works. So we'll be expanding to additional blockchains. And a lot of it's just kind of investing in the core, listening to customers, and really just building the features that the users want.
Do you have a thought for what OpenSea might look like in 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, I really hope that, it's hard to say exactly what will be the main use cases for NFTs then, but I think it's just a broad expansion, right? I think gaming by that time will be huge. I think this idea of the metaverse will come to fruition in a bigger way, and virtual worlds will be really interesting. I mean, I hope that OpenSea will continue to be the best and largest marketplace. I think there will be other marketplaces as well, but our vision is really to be the broadest, most trusted, horizontal marketplace and just provide the best user experience. And we think that is a really valuable component of this sort of metaverse ecosystem that will evolve. So yeah, it was just really exciting to think about all the future use cases for sure.
Great, wonderful. Well, we're just about time, so thank you so much,
Yeah,
Devin, for
thanks for
joining
having me.
us. Yeah, thanks for sharing your stories, and I'll throw this back to Ryan.